So folks, I think we need to talk about hoarding. This is a topic I've been wanting to discuss for a long time because as a maker, I naturally hoard stuff. I hate going out and buying something that I've just put in the bin maybe 2 weeks earlier or whatever. So we all have this kind of natural tendency to hold on to stuff just in case we need it. And sometimes that can work out for the best, but often it's a curse. And there's a darker side to all of this that I want to cover off a little bit later on in the video. But just let me show you the practical reality of the problems that I've got at the moment. If you've been following this channel for a while, you'll know that I used to have a much bigger workshop and then we kind of downsized a bit, and most of the stuff that I had in the old bigger workshop kind of came with us to this much smaller garage workshop, and really even this workshop is bigger than I need. I'm hardly ever in this space, and I know a lot of you have kind of said over the years, why don't I build another workshop? And it's because I don't run that business anymore. So any workshop that I do have is really just for personal use. But I've still got a lot of my old tools, and it's all getting a little bit ridiculous because I've got so much wasted space in here, and it could all be utilised much, much better. And at the end of the day, because I've got such a shortage of space, things like my table saw, which is like hidden in this little gap over here folded up, is really, really difficult to use because there's nowhere really to set it up. And in the meantime, I've got a giant bandsaw and a giant planer thicknesser to the left and right of it that I literally never use. The bandsaw, I occasionally use it maybe once a year for chopping some firewood, but other than that, it's just a bit of a waste, really. This old kitty planer thicknesser, it's a great machine, but it's really designed for a proper workshop, and it doesn't really work in a garage where you haven't got enough space to actually run a big bit of wood in from either side. And at the end of the day, how many times have I done that in the last few years? Well, the answer is 0. It's literally just acting as a glorified shelf at the minute. In front of that, I've got my old router table. I built this years ago, and it was great when I used to be making like cabinet doors for customers and things like that all the time. And it's covered in spider webs. The speed controller on the router itself is knackered, so that needs fixed. And then next to it here, I've got like an old air filter, air purification thing that I used to have in the old workshop. Again, I had great intentions of setting it up in here, but realistically it's sat on the floor for coming on for 4 years now, so that's probably never going to happen. My bandsaw is basically a shelf. I've got a ridiculous collection of clamps that I almost never use. Don't get us wrong, you can never have too many clamps, but how many times am I going to be using like a 48-inch massive thing like that it just gets in the road of everything else. I can't actually use my workbench as a proper workbench because it's so covered in junk. I've got all sorts of things here, like part of my Test Tuesday rig, which I still want to start doing the Test Tuesday videos again, but because there's so much clutter in here, I've got nowhere to set the rig up, and there's various other problems going along with that. I've got probably 3 or 4 great big containers full of random screws that I've always had good intentions to tidy them up and sort them out, but realistically, is that going to happen? I've got spare tools that are just sitting doing nothing, like my old multi-tool. I've got a battery one. Why have I got like a cabled one? I've got really expensive router bits that I've used basically once for a job, and then I don't do that sort of work anymore. I've got an insane quantity of offcuts of random bits of wood that I might just use in the future for something, but I'm not entirely sure what for, and it's in such a mess I don't know what I've got anyway. And then under the bench I've got this ridiculous collection of, well, some of it's useful and some of it is just hoarding for hoarding's sake. I mean, for example, I've got this entire box here just of like cabinet legs, another entire massive box just of Euro hinges and spare handles. I mean, there must be like 100 spare hinges in there. Another box that's destined for eBay, which yeah, that's not going to happen. Look at this one here. If I just move some of these other, this, by the way, Sauber mortiser. I used it once for a job I was doing, but yeah, never used it since. I'll show you that in a minute. So this is all like curtain bits and draft excluders, but somehow I just seem to have some insane quantity of like curtain hooks and rings and just random bits of curtain. Look, why have I got all that? This mortiser, really, it's a perfect example of what often happens in the trades, where you end up doing a particular job and you buy a tool to do that job. And it's an amazing tool. I mean, I might make a separate video about it at some point if I haven't got rid of it by then. But it's designed for mortising latch holes into doors. I was doing a particular job once where I had like, I don't know, hundreds of latches to fit, and they were all quite deep latches, and it was much easier to just set this up. And then I had great ideas that I would use it for all jobs, but then it takes so long to set it up, and that if you're just doing like one latch, you don't bother. But then as a result, this has just sat in a box for, what, 6 years without being used? I would have said maybe longer. That's a bag of random old tools that I literally never use. Piece of soundproofing stuff. Another box of tools that I never use. Literally don't know what that is. Oh, it's a random socket set. I think we've got a torque wrench there, an old light that I never use. I've got a lifetime supply of biscuits, and they're next to an old iron and a watering timer. Obviously I had all good intentions of sorting this out at some point, but it's just a mess. I have no idea what's in any of those bins. I still haven't sorted out a proper doorstop. I've got an insane amount of like leftover bits of like PIR board, leftover pipe insulation. This is an entire dust extraction system that I never got round to fitting. Now I use it for like storing long things that I probably also don't need. That's just a box of old cable. That's an entire shelf of old cable. I've got an old miter saw stand there underneath the trolley jack. I literally never use it because the bits that clip onto it are broken. Can of diesel, some leftover laminate flooring, random insulation, random flooring underlay, loads and loads of old like giant rusty hinges. And don't get me started on that, or that, or that, or that. I don't even know what's in this. What? Spare like vent cover things? More tarpaulin and kind of DPC membranes than you could possibly use in a lifetime. Tile backer board. This all came from the old windows at the back of the house, and I had great plans to make a greenhouse out of it or something, but realistically that was never going to happen, and in the end it was much easier to just buy a greenhouse. Don't get me started on data hoarding. Needless to say, I've kept every single digital photograph I've ever taken since 2002, so that's a mere 79,603 photos to sort through. You know when you're building something and you get like weird tools and Allen keys and things that you don't want to lose? Yeah. And honestly, that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, what have we got here? Old drumming DVDs, tripods and mic stands that I never use, old music books, a decibel meter that I bought for a video about 5 years ago and I've never even turned it on. I probably don't need 3 broken DCC players. What on earth? Only I can have a gadgets and random box, and a separate MISC tech stuff box, not to mention camera stuff. I can't imagine a single situation when I would need like that quantity of like heavy duty plasterboard fixings. And I've got like all of them, and all of them, and all of them. It's absolute insanity. And you know what's genuinely terrifying? We've already downsized twice. Over the years, we have given away so much stuff to charities and to our local makerspace, but I'm still just surrounded by clutter. I think one of the problems is, as a maker, there's a real temptation to own one of everything. You know what it's like, you're going to do a job and there's a special tool to help you do that job, and you buy it and then it just sits in a drawer gathering dust for the rest of time. And I often get comments on this channel as to why don't I own some particular tool or a particular type of screwdriver or whatever. And the answer's really simple. I've got too much stuff already. The last thing I need to be doing is buying even more junk. Just to very briefly interject, I don't do sponsorships on this channel, so I'm kind of reliant on you buying things from the Gosforth Handyman shop and maybe joining the member zone if that floats your boat. And there's now a new Gosforth Handyman shop that you can connect to directly from YouTube down below, and you can buy lovely things such as this genuine Gosforth Handyman water bottle and the infamous Drink Coffee Make Stuff mug. And for you tea drinkers out there, there is now also a Drink Tea Make Stuff mug as well. Oh, and a new Gosforth Handyman hat as well. There's t-shirts and all sorts of other things, and you can buy the official Gosforth Handyman tape measure from down there now as well. So if it floats your boat and you think you can actually make use of it and not just hoard it, then yeah, link down below. So I've recently turned 50, and it's an interesting age, 50, because you start reflecting on a lot of things in your life as to how you want the rest of your life to pan out. Suddenly, retirement, which used to be one of those things that you just thought would happen like when you're nearly dead, suddenly it's really on the horizon, and you start worrying about things like pensions and financial planning. And there's a serious side to all of this, because ultimately someone has to get rid of all this stuff, and I don't want to have to force it on my wife or my kids to sort through all of this junk. It's an awful job. Now we're going to get a bit morbid here, and I'm sorry, but it's not really anything to be like sad about or upset about, but at some point you're going to die. Everyone around you is going to die, and all of the junk that everyone has accumulated everywhere at some point needs to go somewhere. And I can tell you right now, the majority of it will end up in landfill. I've had to deal with the loss of both of my parents now, and it really helps kind of focus the mind. I lost my dad when I was quite young, but I lost my mum a few years ago. And my mum was a hoarder, and she had so much stuff built up over the years. In the end, she was living on her own in a 3-bed semi before she went into a care home. And that 3-bed semi was full from the floor to the ceilings and into the lofts with junk, and ultimately we had to pay a house clearance company to take all that junk away. It cost, I think, about £2 grand, £2.5 or something. We obviously went through everything as much as we could to find anything kind of sentimental. There was really nothing of value at all, and the rest of it we literally had to pay a company to take it away and dispose of it. We used St Oswald's. St Oswald's are amazing and actually helped a lot with my mum's end of life care, so it was kind of ironic they ended up with a lot of the stuff that they could then sell on in their shops and things, so I'm more than happy with that. And £2.5 grand is a small price to pay to hand that problem over to someone else when maybe you're in a time of grief or whatever. Going through every single object that a dead person used to own is a horrible task. It's really quite emotionally draining. I remember with my mum, I had to go through like hundreds and hundreds of bits of music, like music books, because she was a music teacher, and some of the books were kind of vaguely worth keeping, but I would have said probably 95% of them were like old photocopied bits of music that were really destined for the bin. But there was probably a good skip load of music, and that took literally weeks to sort through, along with like bags and bags of clothes and all sorts of other things. It's a horrible task, and it's not a task that I ever want to leave to a loved one. So on the basis that things are getting a little bit out of control and I want to simplify my life a bit, things have to change. So here's my plan. Every big tool that hasn't been used in the last 2 years is going. The planer thicknesser is going, the bandsaw is going, massive clamps that I never use are going, say goodbye to the router table. Basically, if I'm not using it, it ain't staying in this workshop. Same goes for a lot of the hand tools and smaller things as well, although that's less urgent to get rid of because the biggest issue I've got here is lack of space. But I also want to declutter a lot of that other stuff before it becomes literally worthless. Someone else might as well make use of it. The glass is going to my mate Dan, who's got an allotment, and he'll make much better use of it than me, and even if he can't, I'm sure he'll know other people who can make stuff out of this. Stuff like this will probably just end up on eBay. I want to sort through all of the tools and my hoarding under here. I mean, what's this? I've got another box here that I didn't even show you. Locks, hinges, handles, and random knobs. Brilliant. I want at least 50% of this wood gone as well. Whether or not I turn it into firewood or just take it to the tip, I don't care. I want rid of it. So I'm sure my local makerspace will be more than happy to take on a few more tools and things for their collection. And you know, worst case scenario, if I've given something away that I later find out that I desperately need, I can just go and use it at my local makerspace anyway. But at least then it's kind of benefiting the community in some sort of way, and it's actually going to get used. I did have all great intentions to build up like a repository of tools to hand down to my kids at some point, so when they've got their own home, they've got stuff. But the reality of it is that most of the tools that I seem to be collecting or hoarding are absolute junk, and I wouldn't want them to have it anyway. I'm sure I could buy them a set of half-decent tools, maybe as like sort of a housewarming present or something like that. A lot of the older tools that I've ended up keeping are probably more of a sentimental thing for me, like they were my dad's old tools or whatever, but in most cases they mean nothing to my kids. They've never even met my dad. I briefly talked about data hoarding earlier on, and several years ago, many years ago, I deleted my Facebook account. And one of the triggers for doing that, apart from massive privacy concerns and things like that, one of the trigger points was when my mum passed away and she had a Facebook account. And when a person dies, you have to decide what are you going to do with that Facebook account before it basically gets locked and you don't have access to it anymore. And you know what happens? You press delete. Because Facebook is probably the ultimate hoarding of data that I've ever known on the internet. And if you want proof of that, do a data export from Facebook, which you can request, by the way, and they'll give you a file of pretty much everything you've ever done on Facebook. And it's a disturbing amount of data that they've got on you, including every single photograph and video that you've ever kind of imagined or uploaded over your entire lifetime on the platform. And it's more data than you can ever sort through. And you know, as more and more people I knew were leaving the platform anyway, it became more and more useless. And I thought, well, there's a thing that I don't want people to have to worry about when I get older. I'm just going to delete it now. I did a data export, which I've never looked at, and I pressed delete and got rid of my Facebook account. It was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made in terms of data hoarding, and I've never missed it. So I guess I wanted to share all of this with you guys for a couple of reasons. Obviously, for my own headspace, to kind of get all this clutter out of my head, which kind of stresses me out a little bit. So there's that. There's also the fact that I could free up an enormous amount of space in my workshop, which would let me actually use my table saw, which is probably one of the tools that I would use much more often if I had the space to use it. Do I really need nearly 4 meters of workbench? Give us your thoughts in the comments, because once this is all cleared out, and this clear out's going to take a little while, so do kind of hit subscribe if you want to see how this all pans out over time. But once this is done, I should have a much more functional space and a much more functional brain as well. And I also want to kind of plant the seed with you guys to maybe have a think of not hoarding as much, because at some point it's a problem that either you are going to have to sort out, or even worse, a family member is going to have to sort out. And just trust me on this, because I've gone through it several times now. It's not a job that a family member wants to do when they are grieving. It's the last thing on their mind to be going through like pots of screws and washers and whatever junk you've accumulated on some shelves and things like that. Don't leave that as a task for someone else to sort out, because it's a little bit selfish. The grieving process is hard enough without being reminded on a constant basis, many thousands and thousands of times, of every little thing that your loved one used to own and care for over time. And what your loved ones would much prefer is that you perhaps sort things out, maybe keep a few things that are of sentimental value, but they don't need to sort through all this. So do bear with me, because this is going to take a little while to sort out. It's not going to be an easy project to get rid of all this stuff. I mean, I could just put it all in the bin. That would be an easy solution. But I would rather do something a bit more practical, and as such that's going to take a little while. As I say, my local makerspace will be getting some stuff, charities will be getting stuff, a certain amount of stuff will end up on eBay. There might be some giveaways on the channel, so do make sure you are subscribed. And there will be an enormous amount of stuff that is literally just junk and will end up in the bin. But the kind of nice thing is once you've resigned yourself to having a clear out like this, it already starts to feel incredibly liberating, and I'm kind of looking forward to the whole process and just decluttering everything a little bit. Folks, if you've got any suggestions for like workshop layout and things like that, do post it down in the comments below, because the more inspiration I can get on that side of things, the better. Also, if you've got any ideas of where I can donate some of this stuff to as well, that would be really useful. Pop that down in the comments as well. And perhaps you've had a bit of a mini midlife crisis and decided to give everything away. How do you feel after doing it? I would love to hear from you. Post that down in the comments as well. For now, folks, good luck with your own decluttering if you have a hoarding problem like me. Look after each other, be nice to one another, and we shall see you next time. Tatty bye.